All right. So I'll just make that intro a little more exciting then. Thanks, everyone. So welcome to StoreKit, that is, and the in-app purchase lifecycle. I can tell you're very excited about StoreKit, as you should know. So I am the iOS framework architect for Nami, and just a little about myself. I have been an iOS developer for quite a while, since the SDK release. A long time of that was as a consultant, until last year I joined Nami actually full-time as an employee. As part of that consultancy, I've worked in a lot of different kinds of applications, some of them pretty large. And one of those was the Push.io framework, which was great because it handled, it was in some apps that had millions of users. That was pretty exciting. So it's great to be able to work on things like this that happen, that work for a lot of users, really. So that's kind of cool. And I was going to talk about Nami stuff at the end and then just talk about StoreKit stuff for a while. But really, I want to talk about even a little more than just pure StoreKit. Because it came to me that StoreKit itself is kind of really just that last phase, this purchasing phase. But really, a lot of the in-app purchase sort of complexity, it lives all throughout this whole cycle of how you define products, how you present products, and then the purchasing part is just one component of it. So I really wanted to talk about the whole thing so you can kind of think through products from definition to purchase and really get the whole, just some thoughts and some tips for that whole life cycle of products. So the first phase is this definition where we want to decide how we're going to build products. And so what goes into building a product? Well, we have things like just details like textual things and pricing that goes along in there. But other things you may not start thinking about right away that are maybe good to think about earlier than you might otherwise is how do you handle discounts, for example. Another thing is that you might be thinking about adding products to your app and maybe not do anything about that for a while. But it's really good, I feel like, to start defining those as early as possible and building them up in a way you can use them. And the way that happens is through App Store Connect. And that used to be iTunes Connect, but now it's called App Store Connect for those that use it. Most people are more familiar with the provisioning portal and that kind of tool set on Apple's website, but the product stuff is all set up through App Store Connect. And you go there and you select your app, and then you go in and you build products. Now, I wanted to go into what kind of products are available, the sort of options for you to build on as building blocks. And there's really three kind of basic types here: consumable, non-consumable, and subscription types. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with these types, but I'll just quickly define them for those that don't really know this too well. Consumable stuff is things that can be purchased again and again. One typical use is things like coins in a game, for example, is one typical example. But there's other ways to use this. I'll get to that in a second. There's also non-consumable stuff. And this is just the normal products that you're probably used to in apps for a lot of things, where you buy something once and then that app has that thing unlocked, whatever it is, forever. And that just stays with the app even if you uninstall and reinstall the app, still is there. And then it's a newer kind of form of products that Apple's added is like non-consumable really, but it's subscription, where you have a product and you enable it, but then after some period of time, it's disabled again, and you have to renew the subscription access to that. And so that can be either at your choice. You can make it non-renewing if you like, and a lot of people choose to make that auto-renewing too. That's one option too. So thinking about how to build on top of these things, some ideas for like, for instance, the consumable thing, that's cool for like a gaming application, but you could use that even for normal apps in the form of a tip jar, for example. So one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of apps, I feel like, don't really think about adding purchases until they're really pretty advanced, but there's no reason you can't add purchases even earlier and give them just users who enjoy your application some way to support your application. And even just something as simple as a tip jar might be a really good approach to that. So it's just some way that they can give you a little bit of money to help development out. And you can kind of point that out in whatever ways or just let them find it. But just even to think about starting to add something like that before you think about anything else could be useful. Now, for really the direction that Apple kind of wants us app developers to go, that's the world of subscriptions. And I just wanted to talk a little about that because, I mean, as users, it's a little hard to take on subscriptions. You know, they can kind of seem annoying, but I have to say that that probably is a good direction because over time, how many apps have we known in the past that have been popular and fun, but then they're just kind of faded away? And a lot of that is maybe because the revenue stream, was only one time. You only bought a product once, and then after that, you didn't get any money to them anymore, and they didn't get any money from users, and they maybe couldn't even continue development. So really, a sustainable apping, as I call it, is really based on kind of a more subscription-based world. Maybe you can make that a very low value, make it reasonable, but if you want to make an app that is really in it for the long haul and that can be updated and make cool features added on over time, it's really a good idea to consider subscriptions to give yourself some kind of recurring revenue to provide a base to build on. And the thing to think about that too is that, it might be a little scary to find these products and whatever pricing you're thinking about, you're not really sure what's the right level. But you can change this stuff at any time. You can change pricing on products that you put up, and you can just change those at any time without review. The only thing is that if there's existing subscribers under one price and you change the price for that product that they are subscribed to, they'll be re-prompted if they agree to the new price. So if you make it higher, that might shake out some people. But that just, that could be something you need to do. So it's not too scary to actually just change prices. You can do that, and products aren't really fixed in stone as they might appear to be at first. So then I wanted to talk a little bit about App Store Connect and the product definition screen itself. This is an area where I feel like it's almost as complex as the code really, but there's very little stuff that talks about the App Store Connect side of things, and that's why I wanted to talk through the product sheet a little and what goes in here. So one of the things that's the most important is the product identifier, and this is a kind of code item that you'll be dealing with in code, so it's important to think about. Here I've named this thing Subscription Monthly Radio Nami, and you want to make the name fairly descriptive. I've said that this is a subscription, it's good for a month, and it's for the app. I just kind of do that for clarity. That's a little bit extraneous. But just make this a very clear thing so that when you're working with stuff in code, you're going to be detecting if products are active or not. And so you want to make this kind of clear to yourself what's going on when some of these products have been purchased or not. For subscriptions in particular, there's also a group identifier, and this thing is an identifier that basically acts like a radio button for subscriptions. So if you have, generally if you're going to offer subscriptions, you're going to offer a few different ranges, like a weekly thing, a monthly thing, and a yearly thing at different price points. And this acts to group those together so that they act as one product, basically, for people who purchase. So one of the things that people can do is, let's say they purchased a weekly option for your app, they can go in and opt to move to a different level. They could maybe go to monthly or yearly if they felt like that made more sense. In App Store, because those are grouped under one subscription group identifier, will just move them to the other product. Instead of thinking that they have two subscriptions now, it'll move them as appropriate, and I believe even prorate the pricing that they get for things too, for the amount of time that they've already been subscribed. So that's actually really nice, and so you want to support that. So you want to make sure for any kind of subscription sets that you make sure you have a group identifier. There's just some descriptive text that goes in there too. This name here is really for App Store Connect use only. When you set up a product, it'll ask you for this name, and this is just to help you organize different products that you'll have in App Store Connect. And that goes at the top there. The other thing that can kind of go in here is the description, display name, and description. These are things that would actually go out through maybe the App Store as it describes its prompting for users to buy something or what they've already purchased. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on how you name these things and make these clear to people, because real users will actually be seeing this text. The nice thing is that this is also localizable, so if your app will support localization, just make sure you also think about adding in the appropriate localizations for your products at this phase. And all the products, not just subscriptions, have this kind of localized descriptive text that you can adjust. And this comes in through SKProduct, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. But just keep in mind that as you're setting up products, you want to fill this out for whatever languages you use. Now, the next phase is pricing. So for consumable and non-consumable, just straightforward products, you just kind of enter a price. You enter it in US dollars, and it will sort of flow that pricing to all the little locales through the App Store. Just nicely set up the prices for all the other regions, roughly in the same level as the US price that you've chosen. And you can generally kind of leave those alone. If you have subscriptions, you also have the ability to set up offers, either an introductory offer or a subscription offer. And I'll talk more about what those mean here in a second. So what that is an introductory offer is something that's like a discount or even a free trial for a little bit for something, and this applies only for new people that have not purchased your app before. And subscription offers apply only to people who have already subscribed to your app, and maybe they've lapsed, or maybe they're about to cancel, and you want to offer them some special deal to continue their subscription. That's what those are good for. It's kind of interesting that Apple offers these two different things that are either end of the subscription. I'm not quite sure why they keep that at this level of complexity, but that's just how it works. And there's some more complexity that comes in because of that later as you figure out how to apply these discounts. So just to kind of keep in mind that those go at either end. Another possible approach, if this is too complex of a system for you, is you could also think about just having products that are at different price levels and just treat that, discounting that way, like occasionally offer pricing, some product at a different price level that's a little bit cheaper as part of a sale or something. Just keep in mind if you do that means that your code has to be able to remember and work with more product identifiers, but also it means if you subscribe to something at one level as an auto-renewing thing, it will continue at that lower level too. So if you're trying to use that approach for subscriptions, that leads them down a path that's sort of a lower subscription price path, and you might not want that, and that's when you might want to look at introductory offers. So the last thing that's on this product definition page in App Store Connect is the App Store review information. And there you can fill in a screenshot, and this is actually a lot like the screenshot stuff you enter for just App Store metadata. It has to be a screenshot-sized thing that gets sent up there. And this is just so the reviewer understands where is this product going to be purchased within the application, what does that look like? And then the review notes are how to actually get to that screen so that they could actually trigger that purchase, because they're going to test. App Store review is going to test these purchases. So that leads me to App Store review tips and some things I've learned in submitting stuff through the App Store review with products that are for sale. One of the things is that when you define new products, you have to add the products to an App Store build that gets submitted for review. And the tricky thing is that the App Store, when you have a build in the App Store and you're ready to submit it, it will have all this metadata you can fill out. This is just one little segment of that page and includes this Game Center thing, but nowhere in this thing, for instance, in my example, did I see a way to add the in-app purchases I defined. And that's because I had not filled out that App Store review metadata. So what happens is, as soon as you fill out at least one product that has that metadata, then suddenly, magically, this in-app purchases section will appear. And that appears in the review information. So it's kind of funny, yeah. So the actual metadata for the build you're about to submit to Apple doesn't show any way to do that until you've really filled out the products. And it's kind of funny that way. It just hides that until it actually detects something. So just keep that in mind that you might not see it there, and that's why you have to go back to the products to make sure all the metadata is actually properly filled out. So another thing to keep in mind is if you did take on this multiple product approach like I was talking about, the App Store review team will need to be able to see all of the products that you have submitted. If you're use this little plus button, you start to add all the products you've defined to your app. App Store review is going to look at every one of those and actually try out all the options to make sure they work. So they need to be able to access all of them. If you have some kind of thing that's changing things around, you need to have some way that the App Store review can access all of them. And then it will actually be good. You can submit this, and App Store review will actually look at all of your stuff and, as I said, kind of try out the purchases and try out different options, and they'll review everything. So that kind of leads me to the next section. So now that we have some products defined in our app, we've decided what kind of products we want, and we're going to actually show them to the users. So what goes into that? And this is where you just need to think through, there's more than just the products themselves. There actually needs to be some descriptive text that is around the reason why you're paying for anything. This is something that Apple also wants as part of their guidelines. They say, when you bring up a purchase screen, and I'm going to call it a paywall for the purpose of this talk, when you bring up a purchase screen or paywall, they want to see some nice text that describes what the user is getting. But if you think about it, this is really also a great marketing opportunity at the point that this comes up. This is kind of the key moment, because this is the point where they're about to give you money, so you don't want to give them a reason not to. You want to make this thing look really nice as you can. You want to make them excited for them to purchase whatever it is they have, and explain to them why it's awesome what they're going to get. So this is really like a marketing opportunity and a good place to apply a lot of design skills to, basically. So this looks really nice. There's also some other sort of technical aspects that Apple needs for you to have on something that offers pricing and products to people. One of those things is they want you to have terms and conditions. That just has to be somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this paywall. It used to have to be, along with the pricing, you used to have to be able to link to terms and conditions, but now it could be anywhere in the app. But it does have to be somewhere. I tried submitting an app build that had no terms and conditions just to see what they would do, and sure enough, they rejected that build, and they said I had to have it somewhere. And we ended up putting it in the About page for the app. And that's kind of a nice page to put like legal, kind of blah stuff that no one will ever click on. So you can leave it off the paywall and just kind of put that kind of stuff off somewhere else if you want. But another thing that they do want for sure is they want restore purchases to be somewhere on this. And that's because if the user deletes the app and they reinstall, they need to be able to reactivate purchases that they've had before. So make sure that that's there, because Apple's App Store review will also be looking for that very carefully. And then lastly, you have the products that you actually want to put up there, and those have a number of different components themselves that you kind of need to assemble to display the products that the user is going to try and purchase. And this is where I'm going to get more to the StoreKit stuff itself a little bit. So even at this phase, you start to deal more with StoreKit. So now we're going to get what's called SKProduct, and this is where you take those product identifier strings that you defined before, and you're going to ask StoreKit, okay, I have a set of these product IDs. I want to get back the objects that have all the information that I filled out in that whole definition section for this product. So what you get back, and it has more than this actually, but I kind of highlighted some of the key properties here. It has that localized description and title, and the nice thing is this is already localized for you, so you can just use this directly. You don't have to apply the normal string kind of localization techniques for it. You can just use it and display it. So that's already handled. But the thing is, price and price locale are actually a thing where you need to take that and assemble that in one display thing. Because the price is just a raw decimal number, and it could be for any currency. You don't know, but that's what the price locale tells you, and you use a formatter like the one below. Yeah, wrong button. So you use the formatter like this. This is why I added just this little bit of code just to understand how you use the formatter, and you would set the locale in this formatter to be the same as the price locale. And this is how it would append the correct currency symbol and even format this currency string the correct way for the locale, because the decimal point isn't in the same place in all locales, or they might be formatted different directions. All that stuff can happen. So that's why it's very important that you actually use these price formatters to correctly make use of price locale and the price. Something else on a side note I just wanted to mention too is you'll see that this price is a decimal number. How many of you have worked with decimal numbers before in the past? Okay, so just a handful. So it's really a good idea if you're working with any prices of an app. I highly recommend you look at using as an NS decimal number to store prices, because the thing is, even a double, you'd think a double is this really big floating point precision thing that would totally be able to hold prices, but even a double can just, at a slight breath, just change by pennies how much a price will be. So it's super important to keep pricing in this decimal number, and even do math. Like if you have to do math on pricing for calculation on number of units and stuff, it's important to keep that as a decimal number and do math that way on prices so that it will actually be the real value and not vary by some squiggly amount because of double logic. So that's just a side note that I like to recommend to people. Of course, it has the product identifier in there that you set up. It has the subscription stuff, the group identifier, and it also has, for just subscriptions, the period. So you might have wondered, if you set up a subscription for a month or a week or whatever, how do you know how long of a thing it is so that you can tell the user, if you buy this product, you get a month, and that period thing is the key. It has the duration and some other stuff in there that I'll get into a little bit that talks about how long this subscription is going to be. And then it has the discount stuff. So it has, if you set up any introductory offers, they would appear in introductory price. And if you set up any discounts, subscription offers, that is, they would appear in this discount array. I think in the future, Apple will slowly grow to offer more and more kind of discounting options. And so they would probably also go in here. And that's where they'd be located, where you can get them out. So the thing is, though, so these product discounts, one of the things they have is they have an alternate price, and they have alternate things for how you would present price. So how do you actually use that? Well, that's kind of the interesting thing about these discount things. This is where a lot of the complexity of the discount stuff comes in, is that the application is supposed to determine if it should display these discounts or not. Like you have the product with one price, you have the discount with another, so it's really up to the app. You have to figure out which one of those to display. And that's where you have to start figuring out some stuff, because for introductory offers, basically it's a little bit easier because you only need to figure out if you should actually display, if there's an introductory offer there in the first place, and then if you should display it. The way to do that is a little bit tricky because you have to go into what is called the receipt. And how many of you know about what the App Store receipt actually is doing, or where it is, or even that it's there? Okay, so not very many, yeah, so I'll explain that a bit. So what happens is, as part of StoreKit, there is a receipt that StoreKit maintains for your application. It's a little block of data that it kind of updates from the App Store, and it sits there inside your app, application data directory somewhere. And there's a way from StoreKit you can ask for the URL of this data bundle. Now in that receipt, it will hold previous transactions for any purchases made. And so that's where, to see if you can actually apply an introductory offer, you need to look in there and see if they've ever used an introductory offer before by looking for these particular strings within the receipt for a subscription group ID. And so that's why that's a little bit tricky, because then you need to figure out how to parse this. The parsing of that StoreKit thing is beyond me, but you can look up how to parse this and get into details of that. But that's the thing you have to figure out for that. And the funny thing is here, though, is like even if you go through all this and you get that whole thing wrong for some reason, it will still display the right price. StoreKit actually knows what price it's going to show the user to say, confirm this purchase at $5, $5 or whatever. But it's up to you to actually match what StoreKit is going to tell them. There's no way to ask it what that's really going to be, which is kind of amusing for introductory offers. Because introductory offers will just be applied if they can be to their prices, which is why they're easier to use, because you don't have to really worry if that's going to work or not. And another side note that's kind of funny about this is App Store Review may not catch this. I actually submitted a build in the App Store that had an applicable introductory offer, but I'd gotten the logic wrong for displaying introductory offers, and it wasn't displaying it. But App Store Review never told me that, and they approved the app, and it was fine, and it went in. So App Store Review will not even be necessarily your backstop for this, and I highly recommend testing this to make sure that that's actually going to happen, to make sure that that's working right, if you actually go that way. Subscription offers is funny because, like I said, that comes at the end of a subscription. It's for renewals. So you have to kind of almost do the opposite thing. You have to say, have they ever subscribed to this app? Did they maybe have a subscription before? And if they did, then I can make this offer. And if you mess that up and you give them a subscription offer and you try and push that through StoreKit, I think it will throw some kind of error. I forget what that looks like now. I need to test that again. But it basically won't let that happen because they're not valid for subscription offers, which is a weird and annoying aspect of subscription offers. I really hope they would open up this for both ends of the transaction at some point, and we'll see, maybe they will. And the thing about subscription offers that makes them much trickier than introductory offers is that in addition to that checking, you have to do work that involves a server to actually sign the offer so that StoreKit will know that it's really okay for this user to use this discount you define. So it's very complex. And so in practice, it's very hard to make use of these subscription offers. But they can be reused, and they can be repeated as many times as you want, so they don't have really limits like the introductory offers. Like I said, hopefully, at some point, they'll be offered for the full range of stuff. And then just to kind of get back to a simpler version, forgetting about some of the discount things, and this is what a paywall would look like in practice, like a sample thing with some of the data. Just to talk about, so we have here just this radio Nami application I kind of built out to test some things. And so we have this powerful marketing message, as I mentioned, to indicate the wonders that they will get when they unlock whatever with their purchasing options. We have their store at the bottom so that they can make use of that. And then the two products I just wanted to talk about briefly here is we have a monthly subscription product, and it just has a straightforward price and locale that are combined to display the price in US dollars. But then it also has a period of 1 month from that SKPeriod object. And so we combine that all together for the display thing of saying that it's $1.99 a month. Now the 6-month option is a bit more interesting because here you can see that there's locale and a period of 6 months, but there's really kind of more data around this. And this is where the period has more going on than you might think, because it really defines things in terms of week or month or year, and then it has number of units too. So for instance, for the 6-month subscription option, it'll say this is a monthly subscription, but there's 6 of them that they'll be purchasing. And this is where you actually you want to do some multiplication to display the actual full price they'll be paying, in addition to the breakout price too, that they would really be getting. And then it's always kind of good when you're offering multiple options for pricing to have something that sort of directs them to one option. And this is a good opportunity because this is kind of in the middle and it needs more description. And here I put like a saves 20% over this price. And this is all calculated dynamically because these prices, you could factor in the price for the total versus the other thing and get the real amount that they'd be saving. Okay, so now we've displayed this lovely paywall and they've actually selected an option that they want to buy. And this is where we get into like StoreKit proper. Before we've been working with StoreKit just to get the products, but now we get into what StoreKit is actually doing. And this is the first thing to know about StoreKit. Kind of the core way that StoreKit works is there's a StoreKit queue. And so that's what this diagram is kind of representing, is there's StoreKit in the App Store and then your app. And what StoreKit is, it's a queue that gives you transactions over time about what's happening with your purchasing. So that's what this represents, this little table, because it has actually lots of different kinds of transactions it can send you at different times for different reasons. Some of these that I have defined here are purchasing, failed, deferred, canceled, restored, or purchased. And why do they have purchasing and purchased? I'll get to that in a moment. But they have a lot of different scenarios and ways through this, paths through this. And most of those should actually probably be tested out to make sure your app works okay. Because the thing is that you might get a purchase completed at almost any time, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but that's true. Apple also says that in addition to this whole StoreKit thing with the queue and all this messaging, that you should really have a validation path that takes that receipt that I mentioned earlier, and after a purchase is made, this receipt is updated with the new information about the product that was just purchased. You're supposed to run that past Apple just to make sure everything is okay, because there are mechanisms to kind of spoof the purchasing flow and where people make purchases that they don't really have. So this is supposed to be an extra layer of security that you're really supposed to do that Apple says that you should be doing. But it has to go through your server to talk through Apple. You're not supposed to ask Apple's servers directly from your app to validate receipts. And then when the purchase is complete, you're also supposed to do a little extra work, which is basically you need to store away this information because StoreKit makes it hard to know if you've purchased anything other than that receipt info. So you really want to store away the information that something has been purchased so that you can quickly, within your app, do things and unlock and keep things unlocked and not have to recheck that too often. And that's what this little store thing is recommending. So I wanted to just show a few simple things to kind of unwind that whole complex flow a little bit and show you what a real flow looks like in practice, actually, for the simplest case where something is just purchased and it works. And so what you do is you tell StoreKit you're buying a product. So you're sending in a product identifier saying you want to buy it because they actually click that button in that paywall. So we're sending that to there. So then StoreKit will send you back a purchasing signal. And the reason why it does that is so that you can sort of warm up things. If they're about to purchase something that you might need to unlock some stuff for, maybe at that point you can start downloading assets or whatever. Okay, so then that happens and your app is doing whatever based on that. And so then the user gets an app message, do you want to buy this product at X dollars? And that's that section there where they're being asked that. And they say yes in this case. And then so then it goes to the App Store and then it runs through their credit card stuff and tries to actually buy it. And assuming that all succeeds, it comes back and StoreKit updates your receipt within your app. And then at that point, once that's all happened, you get a purchase signal. And so it's officially, as far as the App Store is concerned, considered purchased, which is great. But again, like I said, you have this validate receipt thing, which goes to your server, it goes up to Apple, back, and it's validated. Okay, you check that, and that's good. And then at that point, to really make sure everything is good, you're supposed to, again, I didn't put it on this diagram, but kind of store away the thought that this thing is really purchased. Probably happened as part of this receipt checking. And then you call finish transaction. It's a little small in this diagram, but you need to call finish transaction in StoreKit on this transaction, the purchased transaction, to let StoreKit know that you are acknowledging that you recognize that purchase happened and that you're all done now and that everything is good as far as you're concerned and you know that the thing is purchased. And a slightly alternate form of this, which can lead to a little more complexity, and this is the case where a user has set up parental approval. Now this is a really interesting case because one of the paths I didn't really talk about much before is that, I don't know how many of you do this, but you can actually make in-app purchases through the App Store itself. How many of you have seen that in practice? Almost no one. Well, it is possible because you can set up promotions in the App Store for in-app purchases, and you can actually complete those through the App Store. And in fact, Apple will actually test that path where some purchase for in-app thing is made from the App Store, and even if you don't offer it yet, they'll actually try that out. I've read. And App Store review might get you if you don't handle this case properly. And this is actually a really similar case, as we'll see in a second, because what's happened is you've signaled a purchase like normal, and the thing says, instead of purchase, okay or not, it's going to someone who has parental approval on, and so it just tells them that this purchase is actually waiting for an okay. And the application then at that point gets back a deferred message. Now, at this point, it could take any amount of time, like a really long time for this to be approved. So your app has to kind of go on and do other things and be prepared for this purchase to just happen sometime later, but not right now. Then you have the person who actually is responsible, they will approve it. It'll go through the normal purchase flow, and your app will get a purchase signal. And this could happen, while your app is closed too. So what happens is when your app wakes back up, this is where Apple recommends that you have the StoreKit queue that I talked about. It's a queue, and you have a listener on this queue for all these events. You're really supposed to start that up at app start, and precisely for reasons like this, where maybe the purchase has been completed even while your app is closed. And it could happen, as this flow shows, even if they make the purchase from within your app, but also if they make the purchase from the App Store, it might well happen that a purchase is completed before your app is ever open, and that's why it's really important to start up this queue stuff as soon as possible, so that you can process this kind of case where a purchase is complete. And then you can go through the normal stuff. And again, you have to call finish transaction. That's just always a key thing to do. So then I had a few thoughts about testing these things. And testing stuff for StoreKit is a little bit tricky because it requires that you have basically set up, it requires a StoreKit tester, because to make purchases, you can test the products, okay? The products will load in the simulator so that you can test out stuff like displaying products and looking at them. But if you want to make actual purchases, that does not work in the simulator. And the reason is because it requires a StoreKit sandbox. They don't support that in the simulator yet. Hopefully, maybe someday they would add that. And so you have to have these StoreKit test users. Now, the interesting thing about those are not set up kind of per app. They're set up at the higher level for your whole account. So you go into App Store Connect as normal, but you don't select your application. You go into users and access, and then off in the lower left corner, there's the sandbox testers deal. And the other thing to think about here is that these are kind of fragile test accounts that you're using up. So you should use sort of temporary forms of email address, because you might be setting up more than one test email account. And the reason for that is that over time, as you make purchases, there's no way to clear these out. So these will actually build up in a queue of purchases in that receipt that I mentioned. Over time, that receipt will get more and more things in it if you're testing subscriptions. So even testing subscriptions, which expire and so let you kind of use the same user, those could build up over time to make a really huge receipt. And the other thing is that if you use non-consumable products, kind of normal products, once you purchase that with a test user, that's it. Like App Store Connect Sandbox knows that that particular email address combo has purchased that product, and it will be that way forever. So you can't test purchasing it again, because you'll just get a message, the product has already been purchased, and it won't work. And the way that this whole thing works is that when you run stuff on the device, it will use the sandbox account. You have to actually log in with the sandbox account and test it. And then it will make use of that. And it works whenever you're running from Xcode. When you do a build from Xcode, it will automatically use the sandbox. But an interesting aspect of this is that that's also true of test flight builds. Anytime you try and buy something through StoreKit in a test flight build, it's going to make use of the sandbox as well. And what can happen here that I've seen in some cases is it will sometimes not even use if they don't have a testing account set up on their device, like they're just some tester that uses test flight, it may prompt them for their own account, their own iTunes account password to make the purchase. But you should be aware that that's okay, because it still happens in the sandbox. It'll even say, sandbox, please enter your password. And that's still okay because it's just for the sandbox, and it won't actually purchase from the real account. and it'll just be a kind of temporary purchase. But that could be an issue in testing that, again, they might purchase a product, and then after that point, the product is permanently purchased for them. So then I just have a few tips around working with StoreKit, too. Again, that finished transaction is super important, and the reason why it's important is because if you don't call that, and you restart the app and relaunch it again, what you'll get is the transaction is sent to you again, because StoreKit knows you didn't finish it, and it knows that it's launched again, and it knows you have these transactions outstanding that never completed. So it'll just keep sending more and more to you. Even if you make multiple purchases, it'll just add those on to the transactions it sends to you for purchase until you actually finally acknowledge its presence and do that. Finished transaction is also important for consumable products too, for a similar reason. I mean, basically for anything else, but again, you have to remember to make sure to store off the information that something has really been purchased before you call finished transaction, so it really is done and the thing is saved off and your app understands the thing is purchased. Again, like I said, the StoreKit monitor has to be up at all times, and restore is an interesting case because it will send you restore signals for all the purchases in the past, including old ones that have expired in the case of subscriptions. So just keep in mind to check, because when you make use of restore for StoreKit to implement that restore option that you have to implement, it will just send you back a bunch of restore things. You want to check to make sure that they're really still current options to give them. And an interesting approach that I found that's an alternative to restore that's kind of nice, because restore will prompt them to enter an App Store password. An interesting approach to that, or alternative, if you do this receipt validation on the server, it's kind of cool, because let's say the user deletes the app, reinstalls it. Well, almost immediately, StoreKit will put some kind of receipt data within the app, and you can take that receipt data, send it to Apple servers, and it'll come back around, and it will give you the very most up-to-date purchases that ever happened, and you can check through that. And at that point, you can actually detect previous purchases, even before they've ever hit restore. So it's one way that you can actually get around that for brand new installs from previous users to actually maybe reactivate products before they even hit restore, actually. You still have to implement restore even if you do that, because that's an Apple requirement, but it can be a lot nicer experience for the user if you can manage something like that. So now is the phase where, having gone through all the StoreKit stuff, I just want to talk a little bit about what actually Nami does and what we're really doing within that space that I just talked about all those sections. And so our main goal, our overall goal, is, like I said here, we're trying to help app developers make money through app sales and not through user data. And by that I mean like ads or other kind of selling other parts off of your user data from your app. It's just a lot healthier approach if really apps could just start charging users directly for the use of the app. And so that's the world that we want to see grow and make more possible, so that you don't have to have these kind of really bad experiences for users and privacy invasion. And this is a big concern with Apple and with a lot of companies. So we want to try and make an approach that helps people put app purchases in their app as soon as possible. So what this is, it's kind of two sections. It's a cloud-based system where you can define paywalls and get some other things going on. And then also we have an SDK that works in tandem with that. So it can dynamically receive paywalls that you define on a server, along with pricing, not pricing because that comes through App Store Connect, but along with product mixes. So you can define whatever product mixes you like in paywalls, and those come down dynamically. And you can kind of build the UI for your paywall on our server, and you can build different kinds of paywalls and send them down over the lifespan of an app build, and you don't have to redeploy your app to try out different kinds of paywalls or even different mixtures of products. It also acts as a complete StoreKit wrapper too, and so you can just make use of that to handle and really simplify a lot of the StoreKit action that happens that I talked about. It integrates with existing paywalls as well, so if you don't want to use the paywalls that you can kind of build on the server, there's still a way where you can get that metadata that you define on the server, and you can get that and use that for your own application building, including like dynamic product mixes and things. And also, it's very lightweight in operation. Our intent is no impact on UI or app performance. We try and do everything in background and just as little as possible, really, so that it won't impact the app, including battery life. We try and factor in too. So I'm going to go just quickly through the three sections that I mentioned before and how you can kind of use this to help. So for definition, Nami is useful because it lets you just have an instant paywall, basically, that you can just test products out. So you can test products and maybe a little bit of UI design around your paywall information, even like way ahead of the app development. Like while the app is still extremely primitive, you can be playing around with products and pricing options and just try some stuff and have design going into working with paywalls. For presentation aspect, like I mentioned, there's all those different components you need to think about. If you use the built-in paywall stuff that we have a lot of design kind of going into that, and we're working on more and more designers to try and come up with improved paywall ideas and things that we'll offer over time. And then it handles loading the products and displaying the product information properly and putting in this metadata that you can have on the server and change dynamically as you want to change your messaging around a little bit. And that could all be presented real easily with very little work on your part. I mean, it's basically just a little bit of code to say display this paywall, and it'll work from there. So that's just kind of what I mentioned. It also lets you, just to talk about one more thing there, it lets you integrate purchase blocks really early in your development. Because a lot of times, purchasing is something that you don't maybe put the purchasing blocks within your development cycle until very late, because they kind of block your testing of how the whole app works. But the thing is, it's really better to kind of live with that the way a user would, to understand how your application is to use with these sort of purchasing blocks in place. And part of why that's possible is because this is a sort of testing concern too. We have this bypass StoreKit mode. And what this does is it basically, for any purchases, it still uses SKProducts from App Store Connect, so it's using real products. But any purchases made just are stored within the SDK, and your app is informed about them as if it were happening from the real StoreKit. And so this is a way that you can test purchasing on the simulator, or you can test purchasing on device without having to worry about those test user logins. So it just makes it a lot simpler to test the purchasing flow. And we also have dynamic rules around raising these paywalls that are hopefully less annoying to users, because you can set up rules, and then over time, we also have machine learning apply. We'll kind of pick up ideas about how users are using the paywalls and if they're purchasing and when that happens, to get an idea of a happy user time for when a paywall is most effective. And lastly, for the purchase flow, like I said, we wrap the StoreKit stuff. We handle the restore flow internally, so you don't even have to think about that. You can just send us a restore, or the paywall will send restore, and then that just works. And we also just simplify the processing of purchasing stuff. We have signaling around purchases being made, so you'll just know, oh, a purchase has been made. Because that's really all an app generally cares about. Is something purchased or not? You can ask your SDK that. Is this product ID purchased? And we'll tell you that. Or you can have handlers, too, that can react to purchasing, including the different levels of signals. We don't hide everything. We kind of tell you still if a purchasing thing is in track or in the middle of operation, and give you some of the more advanced things if you want, but you can just simplify it down to just checking for products being purchased. And we also check purchasing performance, too, through the web dashboard. And then there's not really any time left. I just wanted to mention that we have a demo real quick, and I'll just show you where that is. So on GitHub, we have NamiML-Nami-iOS. This has our framework, but it also has a test products repository. And what that is, if you look at the simulator here, I'll just shrink that down a wee bit. Maybe not very much. It will not come up. Anyway, you can kind of run this and get an idea. This offers a sample subscription that shows products. And there's also a bit of code that I'll just mention briefly, has all the interesting kind of Nami-based stuff within the view controller stuff. It shows working with products. And then just the setup stuff, including Nami app ID, setting a Nami app ID basically, and this bypass StoreKit thing are in there. And this is using the framework too. So there's this framework out there, and you can try using that. Or, if you want to, just feel free to come and talk to us. Going back to Keynote. There's many options to connect with us if you have more questions, or even just want to talk about StoreKit. I'm happy to answer also just general StoreKit questions too, if you have that. And also, my colleague Alejandro is here, and he's an excellent expert at really kind of managing and thinking about product mixes. So if you want to kind of discuss product strategy, he would be an excellent person to talk to just about product strategy in general and thinking about how to use products within your application and all that aspect of things. You can you can look at stuff on our website or that GitHub that I mentioned. Also feel free to email me or follow me on Twitter. This is purely an Xcode kind of informational thing. And the slides are located here. And just like I said, anytime I'm around the conference the whole rest of the time, or I'll be at the Nami table off and on out there, as well as some of my companions too. So thanks.